So, good morning once again. I will speak about mostly about the work on the level of European Union, and it is about, of course, following the introduction of the planetary boundary concept introduced in 2009 that aimed to define the environmental limits within which humanity can safely operate. This framework was proposed by Rockström and several other authors, and it identified 9 processes that regulate the stability and resilience of the Earth system. These are like planetary life support systems. The framework proposes precautionary quantitative planetary boundaries within which humanity can continue to develop and thrive, also referred to as a safe operating space. And nevertheless, we can conclude that this approach has proved influential in global sustainability policy development. For example, the new Environment Action Programme of the European Union, this is the ASEAP, has reinforced the long-term objective already from the 7th EAP, now with planetary boundaries explicitly mentioned. And it says that by 2050, people in Europe will live well within the planetary boundaries in a well-being economy where nothing is wasted, growth is regenerative. We can connect with the presentation by Matis, and of course, climate neutrality has been achieved. Since 2009, Earth system science has developed also new approaches. And there are some uncertainties and methodological problems and some other issues. I will speak about them later. This is the well-known initial figure of 9 planetary boundaries, and it is estimated that humanity has already overshot the limits that define the safe operating space for 4 planetary boundaries: biosphere integrity, climate change, land system change, and biogeochemical flows. As it has been stated, crossing these boundaries increases the risk of generating large-scale, abrupt, or irreversible environmental changes that could turn the Earth system into states detrimental or catastrophic for human development. Now, this exploration towards a realization of planetary boundary concept were reinforced by EU policy documents like the ACE Action Programme, Environment Action Programme, and several organizations are working on these realizations. Here is the 5-year project trajectory on the level of European Union. We will focus on the last report by European Environment Agency and Swiss Federal Office of Environment. These are the main knowledge questions. Yeah, as I said, there are several other organizations and also research partners, universities, institutes, and so on. The questions were: what is a safe operating space for Europe? What is the global environmental footprint of Europe, and does Europe live within its safe operating space? And answers require the allocation of European, national, regional shares of the global safe operating space. This was a very important issue for this study. The authors argue that predominant allocation approach per capita proportion of the global population does not necessarily reflect the needed plurality of perspectives. So they defined a basket of different allocation principles, and there are, of course, multiple calculation approaches behind a principle of equality, of needs, of rights to development, of sovereignty, of capability, it means ability to pay, and we can see very different percentages allocated by to Europe by these different allocation principles, from 4.1% to 12.5%, and they calculated these limits for European limits with footprints for 33 countries. These are all EU countries and other 6 other countries that are also members of the EA network, AONet. They concentrated on 4 boundaries: nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, land system change, and freshwater use. And these are the results for the limits for question A. Then calculations and factors of overshoot. We see nitrogen cycle is the biggest overshoot, while freshwater use is not such an issue in Europe. Conclusions, that means key messages and policy. Europe faces key systemic challenges related to nutrient pollution, nitrogen and phosphorus, and land system change. The European footprint should be reduced by a factor of 3 for nitrogen losses and a factor of 2 for phosphorus losses and land change. Profound transformations of the current systems of consumption and production will be needed, including society's consumption patterns. The food system is a key leverage point. The policy objective for these 4 boundaries, of course. The policy objectives under the European Green Deal provide a unique opportunity to deliver on European territory, for example, the climate law, frame to work, and biodiversity strategy in the Zero Pollution Action Plan. So we have several documents already adopted. And then we have the study by Joint Research Center of the European Commission in Ispra in Italy that assessed the environmental impacts of European production and consumption against planetary boundaries with a life cycle assessment-based approach, LCA approach. The work has been focused on the footprint side of PBS and its application to products, services, and sectors from a life cycle assessment perspective. This also includes the analysis and identification of the environmental categories and control variables for the different Earth system processes. So 16 impact categories that can be matched with planetary boundaries. And the analysis was then performed on different economic sectors. Results show that global environmental impacts transgress several life cycle impact assessment-based PBS. Impacts of EU consumption related to climate change, particulate matter, land use, and mineral resources were close to or already transgressed the global boundaries. The results are affected by uncertainty regarding different LCA modeling approaches and indicators, and estimating LCIA-based PBS. So we have, of course, methodological issues. Here, this is the picture from also the image from the website, where you can see that they took into account environmental emissions to air, water, and soil, 16 potential impact indicators, and assessment according to planetary boundaries and SDGs, quite complex methodology. Here only to see which products are considered. So we have, of course, several products, and these are the results according to, of course, these 16 indicators and SDGs. As I said, this was allocation per capita, and we can see, for example, particular method, climate change transgressing 10 times or 10 times the planetary boundaries. Now we continue with the next approach by Donut Economic Action Lab. Addresses the social shortfall and ecological overshoot of nations. It is based on the so-called donut, which is combining the planetary boundaries with sustainability or social indicators. Again, using per capita allocation of planetary boundaries, comparable with the equality principle in the EA4N study. And the donut-shaped safe and just space framework, also called the donut of social and planetary boundaries, has received widespread attention because it's a holistic tool for envisioning human development on a stable and resilient planet. The donut combines two core concepts: an ecological ceiling that avoids critical planetary degradation, which is informed by the planetary boundaries framework for Earth system stability, and a sufficient social foundation that avoids critical human deprivation, which is closely aligned with the 12 social priorities of the Sustainable Development Goals. What is important for this widespread, receiving this widespread attention is that the donut visualizes the goal of meeting the needs of all people within the midst of the living planet. And also they calculated these indicators across more than 140 countries from 1992 to 2015, so there is historical dynamics. And they also use more recent data than previous two approaches. This is the general concept. So you put development goals in the center and planetary boundaries outside the donut. And this is donut of social and planetary boundaries for Slovenia. Maybe you will be interested to look at it. We can see that we transgress all planetary boundaries that were calculated, and we have some shortfalls also for two of the social boundaries. Namely, if we look, EM is employment and LS is life satisfaction. We can see material footprint, CO2 emissions, phosphorus, nitrogen, all very, very high. Land use change is a problem, and also ecological footprint. They used ecological footprint by Global Footprint Network. Now, I think you understand the colors here, what they mean. We can look at the global results. Globally, of course, shortfalls for all SDGs, social SDGs. Then also overshoots for climate change, biodiversity loss, land conversion, and nitrogen and phosphorus loading. If we look across the countries, we can conclude that every nation must transform. From Malawi, of course, with social shortfalls, and Sweden, all SDGs very high are achieved, however, on the account of environment. Also, China has serious problems. Then, of course, they presented results for all these countries in a graphical form. We can see that no country currently meets the basic needs of its residents at a level of resource use that could be sustainably extended to all people globally. And this is the goal that should be achieved. Here are socially, economically most developed countries. We can see Slovenia also quite high. And this is number of biophysical boundaries transgressed. In generally, places that do well in terms of social achievement use resources at unsustainable levels, while places that use resources sustainably do not reach a sufficient social foundation. If I continue with conclusions, within Europe, 3 important approaches to planetary boundaries are developing. And the ecological footprint by Global Footprint Network quantifies the growing human demand versus biological regeneration. This is a sort of complementary approach. Much further research and discussion are needed before a common European approach can be adopted. This is, of course, the goal of the European institutions. There exists the necessity to develop a common understanding of how to apply PBS. We can see that different allocation approaches can be applied, and of course, we need to discuss them. Issues of reference years and availability of data is serious. It can further impede the effective use of the planetary boundaries framework in policy design and implementation for the 2030 period. The EA study operates with the 2011 data. The donut framework uses data for 2015, the most recent, but more recent are data for ecological footprint with a 4-year delay only. The question of how to prepare or use the results for policy advising is a very relevant one. A broad range of results, for example, in the research by GRC, might be confusing. And attention is needed to visualization aspects and presentation of results, of course, when we go to public, to decision makers, policy makers, and so on. The one-dimensional utilitarian agricultural perspective of biocapacity allows for a simple, robust quantification to summarize human demand in the context of planetary regeneration as the cost of obscuring the detailed interaction with the biosphere. So Global Footprint Network offers one one number, summary number. Based on the above findings and taking into account the availability of data and calculations, as well, we can see for donut, we have already all calculations for Slovenia and also for ecological footprint, as well as based on previous expert and policy work on the ecological footprint in Slovenia. It is proposed that this work be continued and enriched with the donut-shaped, safe and just space framework. Both concepts are linked to human outcomes in the form of Human Development Index, footprint analysis, or donut economics. Okay, so thank you very much. With Nataša, we will continue to work on these issues. Now I would like to invite to discuss, because at 10:30 sharp, we have to start with presentation by Bart Stegemann on deep demonstration Slovenia, and we will have to move, already agreed with Barbara, her speech and presentation after the deep demonstration Slovenia paper. So I think I can stop sharing. Maybe Matis would like to comment, or somebody else.
As I see, the government is involved already. We have to somehow motivate the schools up to university to use all the instruments which are available, footprints and the boundaries, and as you said, the United Nations documents. So this is very important, and we have to make them available for, especially for the youth, which will live until the 2100. Matis.
Thank you. It's wonderful. I think one key question always is, how do we link the narrative of kind of the interest of the people we talk to with the ecological necessities? And so I think that's kind of, so with the data, how to bring the essence. Why is it of essence for a nation to address this in order to be strong in the future? I think if that conflict we cannot resolve for them, we just keep knocking at doors, I think, in some ways. But I think to show, kind of to get back to core principles, what's the essence, and then peel it apart as you did in terms of what are the various issues we need to address, also helps that you find the various actors that can actually do something about it. So there's a great synergy between kind of the breakdown from the planetary boundaries perspective of the various aspects and looking at the overarching pressures. So I think it's very helpful.
Some other question?
Yes, my question would be, are the results of all these different measurements very different from each other? Or are they sometimes even excluding each other? Because in many cases, we know that measurements depend on starting points of those who measure. So it can be that different viewpoints are included, and therefore the results can differ. That's a layman question.
Yes, the discussion is still going on, but when I look at this figure, this graph, I think it would be possible to calculate, to compare it with the figure, with the graph on Human Development Index and ecological footprint that has been calculated for several years now by Global Footprint Network. What do you think, Matis?
Well, I know I don't know enough to measure how well it is doing.
No, yes, there are issues with the methodologies that have been into account when comparing results. But if we look at the final results like this graph, I think we can find several similarities.
Good.
But I would like to hear the comment from Matis.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I wouldn't use the word methodological differences. I think the most useful way to look at things is what are the differences, what are the questions that are being addressed, you know, so what's the answer for? So it's not just a black box method that puts together numbers, but what's the question that is the most relevant one for decision makers to move forward. We have used this HDI footprint graph, which is very similar to the one that you're showing now, I think quite successfully with investors, because then they start to see the self-interest. If we help them say, we want to help you pick the companies that are able to drive their consumers or their clients into that sweet spot, because that will make these companies much more valuable in the long run. That's got a great indication of long-term value gain for those kind of companies. They get very excited and they see the utility and they want to know more. And so I think presenting, like understanding what's the need of the people you talk to and how does it help them make better decisions that are consistent with sustainability and with their business interests, then you start to see the movement. And I think that's the sweet spot we need to find. Too often it's just shown as kind of the moral obligation. Countries have the moral obligation to move in this direction, and then we keep making this speech, but there's not much door opening. So you have to link to the interest, to the skin in the game of the audience.
Yeah, it would be helpful if we could deliver to the schools and to the companies some sort, let's say, a PowerPoint presentation ready for showing, including the methodology, how you can calculate your footprint, how you can improve your planetary boundaries. I would also include the Happy Planet Index because it is showing the contradiction between these two axes which you have shown. How you can spoil your position by being too resource active, yeah. So using too much resources. One more quick question or comment?
Just to add, there are several results also available on the level of cities, local government, local communities also, both with, I think, with ecological footprint and the donut approach.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation and the discussion.